Hi, my name is Kate and I'm from Tryzens Global. We're an agency that believes amazing things are possible in digital commerce when you look up. So you would have already seen that we did a peak readiness video with Matt, who talked more about performance, site readiness, handling things like traffic loads, security. But I really felt like it would be a good opportunity to have a talk about what happens from the UX point of view, the CX point of view, and the experimentation point of view. So today we're going to be joined again by the lovely Aimée. For anyone that hasn't met Aimée, would you like to introduce yourself and what you do at Tryzens?
Thank you, Kate. Such a warm welcome. Hello, everybody. So I'm Aimée Hart. I head up CX at Tryzens. So looking to, support brands across customer experience. So primarily the on-site web experience, but actually much broader, especially for those omni-channel retailers. UX, so user experience specifically on particular problem statements or pages that brands have. So we deploy a number of initiatives to help them bring insight into the process, and then create those amazing designs off the back of it. And then optimization, so experimentation, looking at ways and means of helping clients achieve more impactful KPIs, but a more impactful experience to the brands.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it's all about making the most of what you've got, right? And making sure that you're getting a return on that investment. So we were having a quick chat around, well, right before this, around how we see changes in customer experience during peak and, some of the needs and wants. So did you want to talk us through the sorts of changes that we typically see in consumer behavior around peak?
Yeah, so I think it's a great, topic, and definitely peak, we know from experience also working client side before Tryzens at the Body Shop, peak is sometimes literally 30-40% of your revenue as a business. So it's really critical to get the most out of that high volume trading time. So I suppose from us, we have looked at some of the trends over the past couple of months. Beyond that as well, just to kind of look at the overall performance across across a lot of our clients. And one of the standouts for me is I've noticed that the proportion between mobile and desktop traffic has leveled off at sort of that between 70 and 80% of your traffic mix. So that leveling off.
Sorry, when you say 70 to 80%, you mean coming through mobile or coming through?
Yeah, coming through mobile. So the leveling off piece isn't necessarily the standout. It's the proportion of traffic within that mobile mix. So when we've looked into the mobile traffic itself, the channel splits, what we're seeing there between, say, organic, PPC, and social, it's the rise of social within that mobile proportion that's really interesting, because that when we looked at the clients we work with and then benchmark versus industry kind of market research, the rise of social ads is a significant trend that's going to increase and continue to increase. And what that means for us is, and why that's important, is the change of that customer profile. So the expectation of someone coming through mobile on social ads to your site for the first time, typically they land deeper into the site. So you're not landing on the homepage, you're landing on PDP or PLP. So, the thing that, makes us reflect and adapt, say, some of the changes in our optimization tactics are thinking about that new user has questions like, who is this brand? What do they sell? Why should I buy from them? And landing very deep into the site. A returning user already knows about the brand, has perhaps already bought with them, and doesn't need necessarily those questions answered. So on the one hand, we've got a rise of social ads traffic hitting the site, and it will be amplified in peak. And on the same side, you've got your returning users who know your brand, and you don't want to degrade their experience of them sort of landing typically through the homepage, because they're coming in through organic and direct and they know your brand. So this makes it really important for us as a key trend to take action in terms of then what happens during peak. What do we want to think about doing differently? So for example, for me, these trends actually talk to the landing page experience as an initiative, as an actual piece of, an initiative to be really thinking hard on and thinking on the tactics you want to deploy through peak to make that landing experience, impactful for the new customer, drive better ROI for the investment on acquiring new customers, but at the same time not degrading your existing customer experience who lands through the homepage. And the other kind of trend, we hear it every year, right? But it's still significant for especially fashion. People are outfit buying, people are going out. It's, that time of the year, right? So, what does that mean? If you've got a shipping threshold that's free and the returns could be impacted by that. So, the returns and the rising cost that has on businesses we work with is again another kind of takeout from the data and how we might think about doing things differently for peak.
So I guess we've spoken about some of the trends, but should we talk about what they need, right? What you should be doing to sort of build on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thinking about the what does that mean for me? And again, a lot of the work we've done with some of the clients this year has been about focusing in on the attitudinal and observational insights to complement the data. So we've spoken about some key stats, rise of social ads, heavily focusing the experience to a mobile user who has limited viewport and screen size. So that's great as a stat, but what does that mean? What is the actual needs of the customers? What are they expecting and how are they going to behave? So we've worked through lots of rapid kind of guerrilla type usability tests with clients and pulled out some of the kind of key trends, again, from an attitudinal point of view, that I believe are going to be as impactful through peak as they are sort of over the course of this last year. So brand perception, we've heard, customers of brands we work with, when they have a great experience on your website, that transcends and goes beyond. So, thinking about what packaging, how the product's going to arrive, the shipping and the sort of returns, a good returns policy. So just because you have a good CX up to the point of transacting, don't just think about that, think about beyond, because it's the whole customer experience that counts. And that's the base level, right? When we talk to customers, the base level need or expectation from brands, particularly luxury, as you can imagine, is that it's from start to end and not just us as a business thinking it's just e-commerce, for example.
Yeah, it's that brand promise, right? It's not just about, I've shopped on the site and that's happened. It's about, sort of thinking about customers. If you do have stores, if they go in store, what's the kind of experience they get and how do you bump that up?
Yeah. And again, some of the other sort of themes that I continue to come back to, but they are so prevalent when we speak to customers. Body diversity, we were speaking about this a while back, right? And it's as prevalent when I speak to customers about, what would make this a good experience for you. I hear, well, something reflects my age, my height, or my shape. Those sorts of things are still really important. And we're seeing that consistent trend. So there's no reason why it won't persist into peak, and there'll be, more of the same people wanting or needing that from brands they shop with or don't know about yet and would love to see something that reflects their needs. And then the third kind of takeaway for me around that attitudinal piece is about the visual content. So we're overcoming a lot of those sensory barriers, right, with e-com, where you can't touch the fabric, but you can't hear it, and those things are important with fashion as well, right? So what when we've tested and looked at usability testing with groups, focus groups, video content is still really impactful to overcome some of those sensory barriers. So if you've got them on the website, but they're just not in the right place, like, give prominence, find a way of making those, higher up in the page or earlier on in the journey to really kind of, build that immersive feeling. And if you're not in sort of fashion, then why not sort of have more around expert opinion, because if you're in, I don't know, selling hardware or that sort of product, having someone say, you know, here are all the great features of this product and this is why we love them, you know, hearing someone say that to you is really compelling.
Yeah, I would guess as well, though, that video works for just about anything, because a lot of the questions I have, for example, whether it be a plant, a mobile phone, a piece of decor, I want to understand those same things as fashion, which is like color,
Yeah.
text, scale. So if there's a video of someone holding up their phone and saying, well, here it is, and you can see that, you know, according to my hand, it's this sort of size, right? You can see the different textures that go on, like a mirror finish or something like that, then it makes it a lot more effective, and it's a way to rise above against a competitor, right? Because
you know, you're right. And this just triggered me to another point on that. You know, if there are listeners here today thinking, oh, we haven't got video, or we haven't got the you know, the resource just yet, it's on the roadmap, but we've not got there yet. What have you got today that's, you know, images that kind of give that you know, blended approach? So maybe you've got images that are taken from a bird's eye view. Maybe you've got images that, like you say, put your product in situations where you can then appreciate the size a bit more. And we do know, like, users are going to hit that PDP from social, mobile, and they're going to scroll those images really fast just to build that initial context and kind of start that mental modal of like, okay, am I interested? You know, what does this need? What does this product meet in terms of my needs? So yeah, anything you have currently on the site that builds on the visual, perfect.
yeah, and I guess, sorry, another example that I thought of, because I know every peak trade, I'm usually looking at skincare and beauty and things like that. And so what I have seen done as well in video or in GIF form is texture, right? Texture swabs where you can see the texture of a product, or like the gleam, or you see the influencer shots, for example, if you're talking about color, where they put them onto different skin tones and have the full palette sort of swiped on their forearm. So I think really simple things can help with that decision-making process and push someone across the line.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So we've spoken about some of the changes in behavior. We've spoken about what we should be looking out for, what we need to be doing. What do you think ultimately your top picks are, your top tips, right?
Okay.
People should be preparing for.
Yeah, I know. It's like, well, oh, there's so much. We've got so many ideas, and we hear like, oh, but you know, we'll have to wait till after peak, or you know, we're really focused on XYZ. Yeah, totally get it. You know, there's two things that I would say, you know, to our listeners today. If you can even look at one of those, that's a start. Or if you're already doing one of those, look to the second. And the first one is quantifying your content, because you're spending so much time on this for peak, and the teams are looking at what's working, what's not. So by quantifying, I mean looking at, if you haven't already, some free tooling, or maybe you've got paid for tooling, but the heat mapping, scroll abandonments, depth, click rates, tap rates, create that kind of view of your content by page. And maybe you do this through something like Figma, which is a great tool we use with the clients. That every time we swap out campaigns, the design team are injecting their kind of new versions of that page, and then the trading team are layering in the insights through the heat mapping, scroll. So it just gives that blend between the teams working together to optimize the site holistically. But then it gives just, you know, good conversations to drive out around, you know, what is negatively or positively impacting that experience for customers, and continuing down that kind of route of building the picture, making kind of the actions achievable through peak is a great start.
And I suppose that increased level of traffic, right, it makes it even more important. And so, you know, you're going to have more people hitting the site, and it's important to get as much data as possible.
Yeah, it does mean, exactly, that the significance between something that's working well versus not is probably more stark because of that volume piece. And yeah, if you're spending a lot of effort on elements or content above the fold and users aren't going beneath that, you know, what can we do to sort of engage users down the page? Those sorts of things are seem obvious though, right? But again, it's when you see them side by side with the data points and the lovely visuals, it just provokes conversation. And the other bit, yeah, I mentioned this earlier. So looking beyond the conversion rate, so thinking on optimizing that post-purchase behavior. So and I say this because ultimately that's going to impact the customer metrics like LTV and repeat purchase. So if you've got a great experience but something falls down beyond that, that's where we want that kind of more of a holistic view. As I read on a while back, a really great example of that, which has stayed with me. Probably, I don't know why, because it's just ingenious.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a shout out. So there's a Dutch brand that do e-bikes. They're really smart. VanMoof. If you haven't seen these bikes, definitely, they're like the Apple of bikes in e-bike world. And the site is amazing. Anyway, they launched into the US market, and their case study was about the fact that when they launched, a lot of the US based customers were receiving the products damaged, which was having a significant impact on obviously their bottom line. And
great experience as a customer.
Yeah, their belief was that US handlers weren't given the care around the product and just not handling it in the best way. What they realized is that the packaging for these bikes in this flat box, which looked very similar to TVs, like high-end smart TVs,
Right.
realized they were identical. So they put a picture of TVs on their box, and the shipping damages dropped by 70-80%. So, that I find is, great way of thinking beyond just your conversion rate. And like what I said at the very beginning, the packaging also really kind of works in terms of experience and what you feel after you've bought something. It's if it comes in this nice box, nice packaging, sustainable packaging, because that's leans in towards your ethos, then that all kind of comes back to that brand kind of experience and authenticity.
Yeah, so I guess your top tips are start watching and start measuring impact and what customers are doing, because you've got that increased level of traffic, but also then start looking at your post-purchase experience and how you can make that a really seamless one, and one that makes the customer feel like, yeah, they're really trying to take care of me. They're really thinking about the experience that I'm going through. And to be honest, if you're a customer, you shouldn't have to think about that experience. The only time you do think about the experience and the journey really is when things go horribly wrong. Or I guess adversely, when they go really, really well and you're like, holy wow, that was just great. I love the packaging. I love this. I love that. I had a problem with this. It was sorted really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think for any of our listeners today who, they're doing perhaps CRO experimentation, and they're keen to understand what are our tips or my tips for changing things up, which have, they're a bit more like require less of a heavy lift. Let's say, appreciate in peak. Some brands we work with don't want to use the testing at that time. They want to focus more on just trading the site, and others are happy to use that time, that extra traffic to test and learn from different sets of or cohorts of customers. So if you're testing through peak and you are doing things like social proofing, which we know again is a really good effective lever, why not think about the sorts of traffic? For example, if you are trading in the UK and the US, perhaps there is a perception or the reactions to some of those social proofing messages are different in one market to another. So it's like making those small tweaks, perhaps within the existing kind of main initiative or lever you have deployed, might have a different impact to a differentiated kind of audience. So definitely that would be a recommendation, thinking into peak of those brands that already experiment. And the other one, I mentioned it before, and we talked about this, I think, Kate, as well, that there are brands we've seen, and the trend is to start to charge for returns. So I think that's an interesting one. And if we're looking at the cost of shipping and you know, and a free returns, how much of an impact is that having on the business? And is there a way to model a scenario where the that cost is offset somehow with testing? Because that's the whole point of testing, is to understand the impact to your business metrics. And if you have sat on the fence and you believe perhaps there's a negative impact by charging, you won't know unless you test, and you might be surprised, you know, out the back of it. But yeah.
Yeah, okay, fabulous. Well, Aimée, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights. It's always good to hear a different perspective and hear, I guess, what we see with clients across our base, and as well as Dutch bikemaker, which is fabulous. So guys, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Aimée is always super friendly and will definitely chew your ear off about some ideas that she has to sort of help out with the experience and some experimentation scenarios. But thank you again, Aimée. It was lovely to have you.
If we do have listeners who've got some ingenious ideas or sounding out themselves, any, you know, hypotheses for the peak period, we'd love to hear from you guys. So yeah, drop me a line.
Please share. Have a great day, guys.
Cheers.